And we're back for another episode of the Madden Report. As always, I'm your host, James Madden, joined alongside my co-host, Coach Madden. And today's topic is going to be NBA free agency. The free agency opens Thursday, June 30th at 6 p.m. Eastern, and it's going to be a fun-filled summer in the sports world alone, but with a crazy summer ahead of us in the NBA world and a lot of big-name free agents up on the market, it should be an interesting one. But, Coach, thank you for joining me today, as always, and let's get right into it. First is a player that has already opted into his $37 million player option with the Brooklyn Nets, Kyrie Irving. He has expressed interest in leaving and going elsewhere, particularly the Los Angeles Lakers, and he does hold mutual interest with the Lakers. Coach, how do you feel about this decision made by Kyrie Irving and his future with the Brooklyn Nets?
He kind of made that on the personal level, because I think it would have been $6 million to leave or $37 million to stay. But regardless, he is going to tear whatever organization he goes to down. He's just not a good human being, and he just kind of rattles everything around, and then like I said, tears the inside down. So wherever he goes is going to be not fun. I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm not the biggest fan of Kyrie.
Yeah, neither am I. Obviously, Celtics fan. No, I don't think any Celtics fan really feels fondly of Kyrie Irving. But obviously, no surprise he does opt into the player option because he'd be pretty much insane to turn down $37 million. But I still think it's very possible he might end up getting dealt somewhere else. Like I said, the Los Angeles Lakers have a lot of interest in him, which is surprising because I think LeBron has already really experimented playing with Kyrie, and it's interesting enough that he would want to kind of have a reunion with him. But like I said, he opted into his $37 million player option, which is no surprise, and is headed back to Brooklyn for the time being, but very possible he could be dealt somewhere else. Next up, we have another player who opted into his $47 million player option. Talk about a lot of money. The second highest paid player in the NBA going into this season with the Los Angeles Lakers. That's Russell Westbrook. And a lot of Lakers fans, aren't fans of that contract, and I'm not a Lakers fan because that is easily the worst contract in basketball. Only one player makes more money than him, and that's the Finals MVP, Stephen Curry. So Russell Westbrook, for the time being, heading back to LA.
That's a lot of money for a guy getting older. He is deteriorating in talent, and he just pretty much wanted to play on a super team to keep playing on a super team with LeBron, because LeBron is going to try and do his best to get as many overpriced guys as he can just to make himself look better. But Russell Westbrook is deteriorating, and it's probably going to happen a lot faster the older he gets.
Yeah, and like I said, the worst contract in the NBA, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do end up trading him away somewhere else this summer. But it is also very likely that the Los Angeles Lakers, they give him a second shot, because I've seen on Twitter that the front office still wants to give him a little bit of leniency and give him a shot next season, but he's going to have a short leash. So if he has a similar start to the way he started this season, which was shooting like 15-20% from three and shooting a lot of threes, as well as shooting 30% from the field, he's going to be dealt maybe before January 1st. So Russell Westbrook's future is still in doubt in Los Angeles, but for the time being, heading back to LA. And next up, we have veteran point guard John Wall, one of the best players in the NBA 5 years ago, then just has had his fair share of injuries ever since he left Washington. But Wall was bought out by the Houston Rockets, making him an unrestricted free agent, and is expected to sign with the Los Angeles Clippers.
Wall probably, if he does sign with the Clippers, probably going to find himself in a good fit. I think it's just to rebuild his career a little bit, to be out in LA, out in the West, with at least more of a contender than Houston has been, will suit him. I think that might be a good decision for him.
Yeah, and I think this is a solid pickup for the Clippers because John Wall, obviously not the same player we saw 5 years ago in Washington when he was in his prime, but still he's going to serve a big role on that Clippers team, a team that is looking to contend next year. They're going to have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George hopefully fully healthy, so they kind of just need a veteran point guard, a veteran ball handler who they're going to most likely sign for cheap money, and I think will be solid for the Clippers' return to relevancy in the NBA. And next up we have our first of many predictions, Campbell Walker. I have him going to the Lakers or the Nets, depending on decisions with their respective point guards, signing to a veteran minimum at either team.
Yeah, Kemba, I think, is not really about him actually getting minutes, getting a lot of time. But I think it's more of, he's another coach. He's another veteran guy on a bench that can bring up the younger guys that are there wherever he ends up going. I would personally love him to come back to the Celtics because they do need more veteran leadership. And he has been hurt, but hopefully he can stay a little bit healthy wherever he goes. But I think if I had to guess, he would. I think he's going to go to the Lakers and play with LeBron because he seems like a LeBron kind of guy.
Yeah, and like I said, Campbell Walker most likely going to sign a veteran minimum. Will probably serve not as a starting point guard anywhere, but maybe a solid backup point guard. Brings a lot of experience to teams looking to contend. And like I said, I'm a huge Campbell Walker fan, just not the player he used to be. And I can only wish for the best for Kemba. So hopefully he lands on his feet, finds a new home, and is able to produce at a consistent rate there. Next up, we have Miles Bridges, one of the more interesting free agents. I have him heading on a max deal to the Detroit Pistons, heading back home to the state of Michigan.
Yeah, Miles Bridges is an interesting guy. If he lands in Detroit, that'll be a pretty good mix for the Pistons, and I think they might be able to start making runs at the East because they're middle of the pack right now. Maybe 6-7, maybe a little bit less than that, but that would be a pretty good fit for Miles Bridges.
Yeah, and like I said, Miles Bridges is a Michigan kid. He's a native of Flint, Michigan. Played his college ball at Michigan State. So all signs are pointing to him returning to Detroit and returning to Michigan. And there's been a lot of rumors about Deandre Ayton heading to Detroit, but the fact that they got Jalen Durant in the draft and already have Isaiah Stewart makes that very unlikely. And there's a lot of hesitancy from the Charlotte camp to match a max offer because Miles Bridges is a restricted free agent. Anything offered by Detroit or any other team can be matched by Charlotte. But I think that they're going to be hesitant to match the max offer, and Miles Bridges will head to Detroit. Next up, we have Deandre Ayton, one of my favorite players and favorite free agents on the market. I have heading on a max deal to San Antonio.
The rich keep getting richer, James. San Antonio would be a very good fit for him, just the system that they run. Similar to what, Udoka and Hardy, who just went to the Jazz, have brought to the Celtics this year. That would be an extremely good fit for him if that were to come to fruition. San Antonio's probably going to be up and coming again. They've had a couple down years, but I could see them start making another run.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of him. I think that it's also very possible he stays put in Phoenix for just 1 year. Phoenix offered him a $16.4 million qualifying offer. And if he does end up accepting that qualifying offer, he would make $16.4 million this year as well as become an unrestricted free agent next year. So I think, if he doesn't accept that qualifying offer, he heads to San Antonio on a max deal. And I think Phoenix, though, like I said, he's a restricted free agent, so they do have his rights still. I think they won't let him walk for just nothing, so I could see them being part of a Jakob Poeltl sign and trade deal that would send Jakob Poeltl to Phoenix. And next up, maybe the biggest free agent move that there is, Mavericks point guard Jalen Brunson on a max deal to the New York Knicks.
Jalen Brunson, this is, depending on what Kyrie ends up doing. I know there's mutual interest with the Lakers there, but there is some thought that he might go across town in a trade, sign and trade as well. But Brunson, that could pick up the Knicks stock. The Knicks have always been, last couple of years, a floating 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Last couple of years, that could start to put them over the top.
Yeah, and like Jalen Brunson, he really wasn't getting the production that he will get in New York that he was getting in Dallas. Because obviously they have Luka Doncic. So Jalen Brunson, if he does end up going to New York, he will be the primary ball handler for them and will be, a big piece in their success next season. And the Knicks traded Nerlens Noel and Alec Burks to Detroit to help save $19 $19 million in cap space to help free up some cap space on the cap table to help make a push at a top free agent like Jalen Brunson. Next up, we have another one of the more fascinating free agents on the market is Bradley Beal, a player that's been tied with a lot of rumors involving the Celtics. What do you think about Bradley Beal? Because I have him signing a max extension with the Washington Wizards at 5 years, $248 million.
I think if he does opt back in with Washington, I think it'll be a tough sell to sign and trade, to trade for Bradley Beal. But if he opts out, I think that would be a great fit as a number 3, because the number 3 guy right now is whoever you go with. If you go with Marcus Smart, if you go with Al Horford, one's getting older, probably only has a couple years left, and the other one is not a number 3. But a lot of people think he is. But Marcus Smart probably needs to go. But Bradley Beal would be a great fit for Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and I think I really think that's going to happen. I think he's going to opt out, and then sign with the Celtics. And I think he would even take less coming to the Celtics just for a chance to win, because he has no shot at winning with Washington.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think he wants to come to Boston. It's just a matter of whether or not they can take on his contract. But I think he's going to sign the 5-year, $248 million extension, just because I think it's going to be too much money for Beal to turn down, and he's just going to, take the bag over the championship opportunity and head back to Washington and make almost $250 million over the next 5 years. Next up, we have Rudy Gobert, a Jazz big man, former Defensive Player of the Year, and I have him getting traded to the Toronto Raptors in exchange for OG Anunoby and Gary Trent Jr.
If that trade were to happen, Rudy would be a good fit, but I don't think he gets Toronto over the top. Toronto's still struggling from their good run. They haven't, caught back up, which in the NBA it takes some time to do that. After you do run, it's hard to stay consistent. But Rudy Gobert, who's the reason why the NBA shut down 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever it is now, but he doesn't put them over the top. But that probably is the best fit for him, because he'd be a good top end piece for them, but it still doesn't put them over the top.
Yeah, and this trade really helps two teams who, with their needs. I mean, Toronto struggled with size in their interior defense last year, had Siakam play the 5 a lot, which isn't, the recipe for success. And Utah struggled with their wing play and their 3-point shooting, and they'll bring in 2 of, the better shooters in the NBA, Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby. So I think this trade is very possible, and there's been a lot of off-court issues involving Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, and it's kind of one or the other. And if I'm Utah, I take Donovan Mitchell 10 times out of 10 over Rudy Gobert. So I think Rudy Gobert, there's a strong possibility he could be headed to the Toronto Raptors. Next up, we have veteran PJ Tucker, who seems like he just never will get out of the league, always seems to find a new spot, and he plays his role as kind of an enforcer and rebounder and defender very well. I have him signing a 3-year, $30 million deal with the Philadelphia 76ers.
I also have this as well, James. He was in Philly for a good amount of time, and he kind of kept he definitely kept the Heat in that series versus Celtics this past June, early June, late May, early June. He like you say, he's a good defender. He can shoot the ball a little bit. He'll do the dirty work, and he's not going to put them over the top, but it's just a bench guy that they need to start competing again in the East, legitimately contend.
Yeah, and he has already, he's very close and very good friends with James Harden, obviously, who is with Philly as well. And is very close with Daryl Morey, who used to be the general manager of the Houston Rockets, now the vice president or so, something like it. High front office job with Philadelphia. So PJ Tucker to Philly is, I wouldn't say a done deal, but leaning towards very likely for it happening come Thursday at 6 o'clock. Next up, we have Colin Sexton, one of the more interesting players battled an injury last year, tore his ACL early in the season. I have him signing with the Indiana Pacers, a team that's going to trade Malcolm Brogdon, and Cleveland just kind of move on from him with Darius Garland showing glimpses of becoming a superstar in this league.
Colin Sexton, he's a middle-of-the-pack guy to me. I know his skill level should be there for the NBA, but he really hasn't panned out the way he was thought to. Indiana would be a good fit for him because they're seeking some higher-end guys to compete. Usually they're 7, 8, 9. Somewhere in that range, but he would be a good fit for a middle of the pack team. But he's one of those guys that, like we've had the last couple guys. He just doesn't put you over the top. But he will be. He will continue what he has done in the NBA with Indiana.
Yeah, and Colin Sexton, like I said, is a player coming off a torn ACL injury. And I think just Cleveland will prioritize other assets in free agency. And they're a little weary of whether or not he's going to be the same player he was prior to that ACL injury because he's a player that relies so much on his speed and his athleticism. And the ACL injury is, maybe the worst injury for a player who does that. So, like I said, Indiana is likely to trade Malcolm Brogdon, opening up a point guard spot. And he's going to join a solid backcourt with Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield. Next up, Harrison Barnes, veteran forward of the Sacramento Kings, traded to the Miami Heat in exchange for Duncan Robinson and a 2023 first-round pick.
Harrison Barnes is unique. They're probably going to lose Duncan Robinson, and Harrison Barnes will probably fill that role a little bit. He can shoot a little bit. He's a good defender. So that's another one of those, does he put him over the top? Probably not. But he's a good veteran guy, coming in just to sustain what they're possibly losing.
Yeah, and Harrison Barnes is a player who's been around the block. He's competed. He's been a part of championship teams with Golden State. And he's just an all-around, I think, of underrated player. He's obviously getting up there in age. But he's going to bring a lot of veteran leadership to a team that is losing arguably one of their best defenders in P.J. Tucker and one of their biggest veterans in P.J. Tucker. So I think Sacramento, a team looking to get younger and get more athletic, is going to trade Duncan Robinson, going to trade Harrison Barnes in the beat of a heart and send him to Miami, in exchange for Duncan Robinson and the 2023 first-round pick. Next up, we have John Collins, the very athletic forward for the Atlanta Hawks, staying put in Atlanta after a slew of trade rumors surrounding the NBA draft and the beginning of NBA free agency.
John Collins has always been a underrated guy. I think he is more of that superstar, just under that superstar level. But he can score. He can, he can rebound. He can play defense. And Atlanta has always loved him, and I do agree with you. I think he will stay there, although I would love the Celtics to get him.
Yeah, and I think John Collins, especially from a talent standpoint, he's there for this NBA. It's just he hasn't really been able to find the right fit with Atlanta, a team that really centers around their guard play and Trae Young, obviously their franchise point guard. But I love John Collins as a player, and I think they understand the talent he brings and the athleticism he brings to the Atlanta lineup, and they simply just couldn't find the right offer or the right replacement for him, and are going to keep him in Atlanta for at least another season. Next up, we have Malcolm Brogdon, a player, like as we talked about in the Colin Sexton deal, that he's most likely going to be traded. I have him getting traded to Dallas to maybe put them as a contender after losing Jalen Brunson in exchange for Tim Hardaway, Maxi Kleber, Josh Green, and a 2025 first-round pick.
This one would put them over the top in the contending. I mean, will they win it? Maybe, maybe not. But it'll get them closer to that goal of winning the NBA title. They're only one or two players away, and I think he would go a long way in helping them get to that level and add to the pieces that they already have.
Yeah, and Malcolm Brogdon, like I said, is solid. He's kind of the player that they need playing the backcourt with Luka Doncic because he's not a player that loves to shoot the ball. He kind of is a pass-first point guard, and Luka Doncic is their franchise cornerstone. So that's going to be big in their backcourt to help him share the ball. And they've already picked up a center, Christian Wood, who I think could end up being the sneaky best pickup of this NBA offseason in a trade with Houston earlier this summer. But I would love this trade for Dallas. I think any team that lands Malcolm Brogdon, on the market this summer is going to be a lucky team and a happy team. And he's going to maybe push Dallas in a bigger stride towards contending for an NBA title. Next up, we have Zach Levine, a player who is one of the top players on the market, an all-star last season. He's been circulating with numerous teams. He's been circulating with New York, the Lakers, all those big market teams willing to go throw a max contract at him. But I think he stays put in Chicago, signs a max deal. It could because I think it'll end up being his highest offer, and it'll be too much money for him to turn down.
Zach has always been a disappointing player in the NBA. I've always thought he could have been so much better. And yeah, he's probably going to stay in Chicago, but he's just there. He's just, he can play a couple different spots at all times for what Chicago needs, but this doesn't put them over the top to contend for the East. This just won't make a big impact on what they do.
Yeah, and he has really been adamant about getting a certain amount of money. He's wanted the max deal. He was an all-star last season. But another thing for him is he wasn't really the number one option like he had hoped to be entering the season. DeMar DeRozan, early in the season was in MVP talks. I'm a huge DeMar DeRozan fan. And he was, doing his thing for Chicago last year. And kind of slowed it down a little bit, but remained kind of as their number one option on the offensive end. So Zach Levine, I think, like I said, it's too much money for him to turn down. It'll be probably his highest offer to remain in Chicago, and he heads back to the Windy City and helps to make a bigger push in the playoffs next year for Chicago. Next up, we have my personal favorite player in the NBA, Kevin Durant, a player that's been all over the market, it seems, with numerous different rumors, and even, a lot of rumors circulating him in the Celtics, which I think is very unlikely. But I have Kevin Durant returning to Brooklyn and accepting his $40 million player option.
As do I. And he was as much as Kyrie was the problem with the Nets as he was here with the Celtics. KD is the problem with Brooklyn and most teams. It's his way, no way type of thing, and usually it hasn't worked out. Maybe a couple times, but I think he goes there and I think they stay stagnant because, honestly, they don't. Everybody in that organization doesn't like each other. From players to ownership to front office, they all have problems with each other, and it comes from KD and Kyrie.
And yeah, like I said, I think Kevin Durant returns to Brooklyn. It's just going to be, no one in their right mind is going to turn down a $40 million player option. And like I said, there's been rumors around him in Boston because, he's friends with Jason Tatum. He's close with Ime Udoka because of Ime Udoka's days in Brooklyn. But for that to happen, the contract and the money cut would have to be ridiculous by the Celtics, and I just don't see it happening. I don't see any team going out and signing Kevin Durant to $40 million a year. So I think Kevin Durant stays put in Brooklyn, acceptance $40 million, and he just kind of continues to get bounced in the first round. Next up, we have Gary Harris, one of the players who has probably one of the worst contracts in the NBA. He made $22 million this season to really do nothing in Orlando. Kind of the reason why Orlando is where Orlando is with the number one pick and just not a good organization. But I think Gary Harris returns to Denver. He obviously started his career in Denver and was a crucial part of their success and their deep runs in the playoffs. I think he returns to Denver and helps play a crucial role maybe as the starting shooting guard after they traded Monte Morris earlier today to the Los Angeles Lakers, or maybe a backup point guard that'll provide a lot of depth for the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's going to go back and he's just going to, he'll get minutes off the bench. Really never been a starter in the NBA, but he'll get time off the bench and and help in certain roles. But I believe too he's going to go back to Denver just because you kind of go back to where you started and where you like and where you grew up and all that. So.
Yeah, and I would like this signing for Denver. I've been high on Gary Harris, a lot higher maybe than I should be. But Gary Harris, I think, is a solid player. Like I said, he's going to serve as a crucial role in their backcourt, maybe even on the bench. But Denver has a two-time back-to-back MVP in Nikola Jokic. So any help is going to be a little bit of help because they had a tough go of it in the playoffs, lost in 5 to a Golden State Warriors team that we all know how their season ended. But I think Gary Harris heads back to Denver and helps make a push in the playoffs with Nikola Jokic. Next up, we have Jusuf Nurkic, another player who's kind of has been a part of that depleted Portland team, a team that it was one series went away from the NBA Finals not too long ago. Now a team that is in complete disarray. And Jusuf Nurkic, I think, either re-signs with Portland, which I think is very possible just because of a loyalty factor. I mean, him and Damian Lillard have been very loyal to the city of Portland, or he signs with the Charlotte Hornets.
Either wherever he goes, either one, it's not going to make that big of an impact because, as you say, Portland's so far away from competing from an NBA title that whoever they bring in is not going to help unless it's one of the top 5 guys in the NBA. But I don't think they can pay for those kind of guys. But Nurkic will just be middle of the pack, superstar that will just sign for money and play for money and just play in the NBA.
Yeah, and I like this deal for Charlotte if they do end up going out and get him, because Charlotte's a team that has a lot of guard play. Losing a big man in Miles Bridges, an athletic big man. But sure, Jusuf Nurkic won't bring that athleticism, but he'll bring that size, he'll bring the skill, he'll bring the talent to Charlotte. A team looking to compete with a young core. And I would like that signing a lot for Charlotte, a team that doesn't really have a true center. They have Miles Plumlee, but it's Miles Plumlee. So, but they're going to have. I think Jusuf Nurkic would be maybe the steal of free agency for Charlotte if they can end up going out and get him as kind of a big man to pair with LaMelo Ball. And before we move on from the Jusuf Nurkic trade, I want to say one thing to the Portland Trailblazers organization: free Damian Lillard. That's all I have to say. But without a doubt, we're going to move into my personal favorite part of free agency is the Celtics. I mean, there's been a lot of interest surrounding the Celtics and Alec Burks. Probably not going to happen with Burks recently getting traded last night to the Detroit Pistons. He was a veteran guard who could serve as, a solid backup. But one trade, it's kind of a stretch, probably won't happen. But I would be iffy on this trade for the Celtics. D'Angelo Russell traded to Boston for Al Horford and a 2024 first-round pick headed to Minnesota.
Yeah, I would be in favor of this one just because, he's a back-end veteran type. Obviously he can start, he can do a little bit of whatever. He can handle, he can score a little bit. But I think, he would probably be in with Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart would be in a trade for this, I believe. Because if they traded him and as you think Al Horford in a first round pick, which is great, but I think that would just mean this group would be too guard heavy for my taste. They need a couple stretches in there, legitimate John Collins type stretches. But I would love to see D'Angelo Russell in a veteran. Off the bench kind of guy to help support this the scoring.
Yeah, and I would love this deal for the Celtics. I mean, I just think throwing in the first-round pick is a bit too much for D'Angelo Russell, a player who's well past his prime. I mean, he had a solid season with Minnesota, showed glimpses of being back to where he was a couple years ago. But I think if you kind of substitute the 2024 first-round pick, maybe throw Derek White at them, which I think is kind of too much just because if you throw Derek White to Minnesota, you're going to kind of leave yourself without a backup point guard. And at the end of the day, I don't know, how the Celtics camp feels about Peyton Pritchard as their everyday backup point guard. I'm a Peyton Pritchard fan, but he's kind of a shooter. He's a defensive liability. So it would be a bit of a stretch for this deal just because they would have to throw Al Horford just from a financial aspect of it, just because Al Horford's making 25.5, Russell's making 28 or something like that. So he's really the only player up there on the cap table that is able to get this deal done from a financial standpoint. But I think if they could throw Al Horford, maybe I wouldn't like throwing Peyton Pritchard to Minnesota, so probably Al Horford and Derek White to Minnesota for D'Angelo Russell. I think that's a win for the Celtics. And next up, I have a free agency candidate for the Celtics to sign his point guard, Ricky Rubio. He'd serve a similar role that Alec Burks would serve, but Alec Burks is no longer on the market, whereas Ricky Rubio is still on the market. So Ricky Rubio to the Celtics is a veteran backup point guard.
I have always been a Rubio guy. I've always wanted him to come to the Celtics. I think he can play. He can play bigger too. He can play multiple positions. I just think he would be a great fit for the Celtics if they could sign him. But he's another one of those guys that's going to be looking for a little bit of money. He's been around the league a little bit now. And even the mid-range money is kind of absurd in the NBA now. So in order to sign a guy, you need to shovel them some cash. But yeah, I would like to see him in the rotation.
Yeah, and I didn't want to spoil it with my last take about D'Angelo Russell and take the surprise factor out about this prediction. But if you do end up trading Derek White to Minnesota, this is the guy you go out and get if you're the Celtics, because he's a veteran point guard. He knows how to play his role on a team. He knows how to be a backup point guard and play it very well and very consistently. So if you do end up going out getting D'Angelo Russell as your starting point guard, so you kind of take the ball out of Marcus Smart's hands a little bit, make him the 2 guard, and that's a solid starting lineup if you ask me. Smart, Russell, Brown, Tatum, and Time Lord at the center. Talk about Time Lord, my favorite player. But yeah, Ricky Rubio, a solid backup veteran point guard that will provide a lot of depth off the bench, leadership, and take care of the ball, which is something that plagued the Celtics as we went deep into the NBA playoffs last year, and kind of was their kryptonite was, they go out there, turn the ball over 20, 22 times, and then lose by 5. So Ricky Rubio will help prevent that and bring a lot of depth and veteran leadership to the Celtics. And a reunion of some sort with the Jay Crowder and the Boston Celtics. Celtics, kind of showed last year that they need a little bit of more in physicality, need a little bit more toughness. And Jay Crowder's that guy. He knows the system. He knows the organization. He knows the city. So I think Jay Crowder returning to Boston would be a solid trade for the Celtics.
Yeah, I've always liked Jay Crowder. He's big, physical. He can shoot a little bit. He'll fight people for you. And I think he would be a better fit than Tice. I liked Tice in the past, but this year he didn't fit very well, and he kind of was a lot of the reasons why they struggled in the finals. They need some better bench presence than Daniel Tice, and Jay Crowder would fit that mold. He'll like I said, he'll play good defender, shoots a little bit. Can he handle? No. Can he? But he'll go set screens for you, and like I said, he'll get in a fight or two for you, just to keep guys off of the 2 superstars. But I think he would be a very good fit for this next group.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that he knows the city, which is very important, especially Boston's not an easy city for an athlete to come in and kind of get used to playing for the Celtics. So I think Jay Crowder, he's able to stretch the floor a lot more than Daniel Tice does, just because, my opinion, I'm going to sound harsh here, but Daniel Tice I think is horrible. I can't stand Daniel Tice, but this isn't about Daniel Tice. This is about Jay Crowder. And Jay Crowder, I think, will be able to stretch the floor, give them a lot more shooting than Daniel Tice did. And Daniel Tice, I'd be shocked if he doesn't get moved this summer, just because, he's making $9-10 million next year, and he didn't even play in the finals, which isn't really his fault. I mean, finals is where you run a 7-man rotation, but there's no reason to have a guy making that much money, $10 million, to practically do nothing on this in this rotation. So, like I said, Jay Crowder to Boston, all the signs are pointing towards it. Like I said, some of these trades might be a little bit of a stretch for the Celtics. D'Angelo Russell one might be a shot in the dark, but I'm confident Jay Crowder and the Celtics have a reunion. He returns to Boston and he helps bring them a championship next year. And as always, I'm your host James Madden, and thank you, Coach Madden, for joining me once again. And make sure to tune in to our next episode of the Madden Report. And thank you for tuning in.